Good evening. Today, we're going to continue on living financially free. And this message, that we're going to speak today is going to be more on a story. I want to take you on a journey back into my life when we traveled to Nigeria. I want you to try to imagine with me the situations faced. Try to imagine that you're there with me, taking in this journey. What it might look like. You may even go and look later on some images of Nigeria and see what kind of environment it looks like. But I think this is going to be a very important lesson for living financially free. In fact, I think it's one of the biggest character building skills that would be done and talked over this week. I kind of have some advice that I say is if you want to learn to live financially free, go to Nigeria for a year. So in reality, what I'm going to try to do today, instead of paying for a ticket, I want you to come into the mind and come into your imagination and take that journey to think what it would be like if you were in that environment. First, I want to give you some prerequisites for our journey. First, we have a limited amount of cash. It's not a lot. You're not able to get any more if you run out. You don't know how long you're going to be there. Expecting maybe a year, hopefully only 6 months. And the other things about it is you got some other expenses that are going to be needing. You're going to be needing some visa expenses to get back. So some of your money that you have saved up in previous time, you would need to save to be able to pay for the visa so that you can actually leave there, and also the plane ticket to get back to the United States. Think about this for a minute. Let's say you have $2,000 to spend. Now your flight there is taken care of in the back. You got that reserved. But just for your expenses during living there for a year, all you would have is $2,000. Now remember some things about Nigeria. We're going to go not as a rich man, but we're going to go as a poor man. So which means when you go to the banks, if you run out of money, you're not going to be able to get a loan. Because Nigerians, for the most part, and at that time at least, I'm just going by what the time that I was there. You wouldn't be able to get a loan unless you had some kind of collateral. And from what I understand on the collateral, like, for example, you want to put a car down as collateral, they hold your car. I don't know for that for sure, but that's from what I've heard from some posts and that. So a loan is out of the question. You better not run out of money. So, on this journey, you can't live in the posh areas of Nigeria. There's some posh areas that they're real expensive. So, not all of Nigeria is really bad. There are some really high-end areas of Nigeria. But with your limited finances, that's out of the question. You're not going to afford it. So you'll have to live in a poorer neighborhood, hopefully with friends. The other thing, since you're not in a high-end neighborhood, you're going to have to suffer the parts of the area that you're in. For example, in the environment that we would be in, we might not have electricity for most of the day. Some days you might only have 1 to 2 hours. Now, everything that I'm talking here is from experience. But I want you to imagine this. Put yourself in the shoes. Take that journey. A lot of the places do not have running water. Sometimes you can have some running water, but they would have to, they fill a tower manually. And if it runs out, then you're back to manual. At least this was in the areas that we faced when we were there. So manual water. Forget about a water heater. They don't have water heaters. So your water that you're going to bathe with, usually you're going to bathe with a bucket of water. If you want it heated up, if you wanted some warm water, you'd put water on the kettle and put it on a little kerosene stove about the size of a 1 foot square. Heat up the water, have to wait, put it in your water, and you have like a 5-gallon bucket of water to take your bath with. And so, these are some of the living conditions. These are some of the living conditions for an everyday Nigerian. Some of the Nigerians there don't even have the privilege of living in even a house. Some of them live in these little huts or where they sell stuff. They'll live in their little shack that has really no rooms. Some live on the streets. And some sleep in their cars. See, we're used to a environment here that we get everything, and if we don't have what we think we need, the government will step in and say, you need this, when you really don't. So, the idea of technology. See, we brought in a laptop computer with us. But how many know that laptops without a power source doesn't do very good very long? Now today, computers, when you charge up the computer, it might actually last for about 10 hours on some of these new computers. Back then, when we went, they were likely to last about maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half. However, don't expect to have internet. If you wanted internet, you'd go to an internet cafe. And you wouldn't be able to use your own laptop on that. You'd have to use one of these really old, slow computers. At the time, we were running in, not extremely fast. They had single core, maybe 1 point some gigahertz. But in your cafes at that time, anyone know what a 486 is? A 4086 DX, or maybe a low Pentium. They're really slow computers. Imagine using that to connect to the internet. Not only did you have to pay for how long, but to do anything, it took you a long time to do. So, it's kind of like, remember the days of dial-up internet? I think it was worse. Because you were having the low-end computers, trying to get some of the more modern-day sites on a slow connection. All these things we take for granted in America, because we consider them needs. In fact, in Muscatine, if you shut off your electricity, the city will come and put a note on your door that says your house is uninhabitable. Why is it uninhabitable? They live daily like that in Nigeria. We think it's uninhabitable. We don't know what it is to live with contentment. Another thing that I had to face was the environment around there. There's a lot of trash. It was not a clean environment. To me, they looked like open sewers. They were just really for your runoff of water, from, like, for example, when you have your, right by your roads, you have a water collection for your rainwater. So that's what it's supposed to be for, but I considered them more like open sewers because they were filled with trash. So even though it was not really sewage water, it sure imitated it. People would just put their garbage wherever. No care about their environment. Throw it wherever. They didn't want to go out to get rid of it. That would cost money to travel there to the dump or wherever to get rid of it. So just throw it wherever. Out on the roads. And with those conditions, health will take a toll, especially for somebody that was not used to it. Was not used to that environment, so I suffered a lot of health issues while I was there. I had a boil right on basically by my eye, a pretty big, huge boil. Pretty much sick, pretty much all throughout the whole entire time I was there. It was I would say about an inch long, wide, that boil. It was right touching up to my eye, coming right out of my eye. And I looked terrible. but I suffered through it. I would not leave. See, there was something that I had desired more than all these things. My wife was in Nigeria, and I would not leave her. And so, that is not all. Nigeria, anyone know what type of climate Nigeria, besides the Nigerian here? It is a hot environment. I believe from what I see, it's actually closer to the equator than Texas. So it'd be hotter than Texas. This is the first time I've seen a new use for umbrellas. I thought when I got there, it's like I seen everybody using umbrellas, and it's like, what are they? It's not raining. But they use umbrellas, which I've learned pretty quick, to shield yourself from the sun. See, we take comfort way too for granted. See, one thing about this heat, you're talking easily in the hundreds that you're living in, very, very, very hot. I think the nights got down to maybe 70, 78, somewhere around there. So it was very hot, very hot through the day. But remember what I said, you only had electricity, maybe 1 hour, maybe 2. There's sometimes we had more. And sometimes you might have power, but it's not full power. The power fluctuates, so which means it might be high enough for the lights. But when you try to turn that air conditioner on, clunk, not enough. It doesn't have the voltage needed to get it started. And sometimes it'll go days without power. That is true. So all that heat with somebody like me that is not used to that hot environment, especially a light skin, my skin color changed pretty quickly. Not to brown, not to black, but to red. So I had a lot of sunburn. And you had your hot environment that you had to live in with that sunburn. Are we getting a picture here of what it's like in Nigeria? At least what it was like for me? For cooking, if you want a full meal, you know how we have a stove that has like 4 or 5 burners? You cook the whole meal for your entire family on a single kerosene stove. 1 burner. And you'd have to travel to get kerosene. That's more expenses. So your food, you couldn't live on the good, the food you're used to. You have to make use with the food that you can get that you're going to be able to eat, which that's not extremely expensive. There are some restaurants that you can get that's not too bad a price. But you got to take all of that in consideration on your food costs, your heating of your food with kerosene. If you want to go any place, you have to pay for the transportation. There's a lot of expenses there. So we did as much as possible. We stuck to the native food, which again, you'll have a climate that is used to some bacteria and stuff that my body's not used to. The water, we had to buy water. If we wanted water, sometimes we didn't have water at all. Drinking water we didn't have, and there's times that we didn't have bathing water. We would have to buy water for bathing. And there's some places, I guess, that you could go down and collect the water yourself from a well. That's pretty hard, isn't it? Can you say you could do that? This is where I'm leading up to. Imagine all that. Imagine that's what we have to go through to get through to be financially free. But reality is we might not have to go that far. However, can you? Could you give up all these things and live on that small budget, living in the worst conditions? What would you do it for? Or would you do it at all? See, the thing that I'm getting here right now is I want actually to reveal for yourself the idols you have in your life. See, anything you cannot give up besides the necessities is an idol. It means we're addicted to it. If we can't live without it, it's holding us hostage. And it will hold you hostage on your financial freedom. You need to be able to release all these things that are not necessities in our lives. Even Jesus says foxes have holes. And birds of the air have nests. But the Son of Man, he has no place to lay his head. He was born in a manger, a stable. He lived in the lowly state. I think there's really good, this was actually a very good time for my life. It taught me something that I don't think could have been learned much anywhere else. And I did this because the woman that I loved was stuck there, and I would not leave her. The question is, what would it take to motivate you to come through those situations? If I were to look before on my life on this, because, see, I had a habit of, even though I was a saver, I saved a lot of money, even on a low job paying job. I spent some of that money on things that were not needed. Like I bought computers, stuff for computers, upgrading computers. So I upgraded a computer a lot, put new hardware in it, gave my older ones to my dad. Bought some things that I actually bought a freezer for my parents and that. It was actually for me ended up because, I just thought, hey, I'm going to be single all my life when I bought it. But I'll help out my parents getting a place to put food because we found a place to get cheap food. That was a blessing later on. But I purchased I was a somewhat big spender. I had the money at the time because I really didn't have much expenses. I had a car that I had to take care of. Not a big, new big car, but it got me place to place. Later on, saving, I was able to buy a brand new car. So a brand new car was waiting for me at home. So before this, I didn't have really a lifestyle of learning what it is to live without. But I'm not alone. Somebody read Philippians 4:11 through 13. So Philippians 4:11 through 13.
Not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. I know how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
So Paul, he learned to know how to live with nothing, and he learned how to live with a lot. Today in the United States, we learn how to live with a lot in the time we don't have anything. This is not right. We think we need this, we need that. Do you really? Let's go to that trip on Nigeria. What do we really need? See, we don't see how desperate our situation is, and then we live in this financial cage for years and years, hoping to get out, but find ourselves bound. And we're bound because we're abounding in the times when we have nothing. We haven't learned to live, to be in want. We haven't learned to thrive in the time where there's nothing. Does anyone know where the happiest continent in the what the happiest continent is? Anyone? Africa. People were extremely happy over there. Do you know that? With nothing. They don't have much. Some of them are living on the streets, and yet they are very happy. Happy people. That doesn't make sense to American culture. We got more than we can even afford, and we're miserable. Because we have not learned to be content. We have learned from our government on how they say you need this, you need that. Even if you can't afford it, we'll just put it on our bill. That's why the United States is leading on debt. We have trillions of dollars of debt. Just think of this. With all that debt, it could have fed the whole entire world. And you would have no one hungry. That's a lot of debt that we're in. Is it not? and we keep on accumulating more. In Nigeria, as I've said, the average person has very little, but they have something. According to a source, Porter, the average person in 2021 in the United States, so if you take the average, you have the average person has negative $92,727. That's negative. And we say United States is a rich country. What's better, having nothing or having a $92,000 debt? I hear so many sermons, oh, well, in Africa and all that stuff, you know, how they're doing so poorly, they don't make much and all that. You don't have to look very far. We might make more, but we spend a whole lot more, and we're in a lot worse situation than they are in Nigeria. And we're the ones that are miserable, not them. To the average person, this does not make sense, because we equate happiness with money, what we have. But that's not true. See, happiness will really come too in your contentment. I could be happy. I was happy being with my wife in Nigeria, even through the hell that I faced. Because the relationship was more important. Otherwise, I would have just left. A lot of people were even telling me, why don't I just leave? Because I got something more important there. See, some people out there need to come into this arrangement of understanding this and be content with nothing. Just like Paul did. Because they don't have anything. They're living on debt, and they're destroying their lives. They're destroying their marriages. Because their debt keeps piling up, and they feel so bound. And it's true. They are bound. They're in prison. The Bible talks about when you're in debt that you are enslaved to the lender. So you are bound. How do you get out of it? One of the very foundations is how much contentment you can have. And I can tell you that you learn that contentment, it'll change your life here. When we came back from the United States, I didn't go on and stay the same way of living. If we couldn't afford it, we didn't have it. That might mean, and it did mean for us, that I'm getting nothing for Christmas because I'm nothing but broke. You learn to deal with it. Today in the United States, it's like, oh, well, you got to get Christmas gifts. It's just the norm. It's time to break some of these norms when you can't afford it. Because here's the thing. When you keep on running up debt, you're putting yourself deeper in a hole. You need to first get out of the hole. You need to first get up on normal ground. And then you can build yourself into a situation that you can handle other things. Paul wasn't where he had nothing for all the time. There was times that he had nothing. He learned to deal with it. But it says there's also times that he abound. It's really great to abound. But there's times that you can't. You got to learn what situation and what place in life you are in and learn to have contentment. Because contentment says that godliness with contentment is great gain. I want somebody to read 1 Timothy 6 through 11. Read 6, and then somebody else can read the rest of them. So read 6. Smart. Go ahead and read 6, chapter 6. Let's see, 6.
Now, godliness with contentment is great gain.
So now contentment with godliness with contentment is great gain. Go ahead and continue.
For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain that we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through many sorrows. But you, O man of God, flee these things and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, and gentleness.
So godliness with contentment is great gain. We've seen in our life, as we've learned to be content in all situations, we have seen great gain. And that's how we've become financial free and where we have prospered greatly. When you learn this situation, to be in whatever situation you are, God will get you and prosper you. If you haven't learned it, then it's likely to keep you in the situation until you learn to be able to be content. Because here's the cycle that people get in. They make a little more money, and then they spend a little more money. They make a little more money, and then they spend a little more money because they have never learned to stay content where they are, even though they can't afford where they are. That's why we see so many foreclosures. We see so many bankruptcies. We need to learn to be content. Out of all the areas that are dealing with financially, I believe that the contentment area has really been an area that was extremely strong and really related to our growth in financial assets. Because we weren't spending money and interest, paying banks. We weren't paying interest in credit cards. We weren't paying interest in any of these things. Paid interest for 3 years. And then no longer will we pay interest. Because we'll live within what we can do. And it said to be content with what? If you have what? You should be content. What are the things that are required that God says, if you have these things, stop complaining that you need anything else? food, and clean clothing. And it says raiment in, I believe, in the King James. And I think that raiment would also be your shelter. So if you have shelter, and it could be just a hut. You might be in the doghouse, but you got shelter. It doesn't say as long as you have comfort or a mansion, a good-looking house, a car. If you have all these things, as long as your comfort is good, be content. It's not what it says. A lot of these things are just new to these centuries. If you go back 50 years, most of what we have, we didn't even have back then. We had no technology. You got people that are so addicted to their technology, they can't leave it. I mean, that you take away their technology, they throw a fit. They're not content. Take away the TV. They'll throw a fit. They're even getting to a place, I've heard, and I think it's in Texas, where the government or something that, in federal prisons or something like that, where the government says, well, prisons have to have cable TV. And one of the things we're complaining about that. Why do prisons have to have cable TV? The prison cells. They do not need TV. TV's probably attributing to some of the problems that are why they got there in the first place. Especially with our liberal media. That they can't understand what peace is and what is not peaceful. I mean, shooting up a few stores and burning a church down, that's a peaceful protest? I don't think so. And yet, a lot of the things with what they call the insurrection on January 6th being, oh, that was a big thing. And I'm not actually condoning what was done, but there is some that was very innocent and are being charged because they were letting the people in. And it's like, if I let somebody into my house, and as long as they don't destroy anything, if you let somebody into your house and then try to charge them for trespassing and an insurrection to my house, do you think that would get anywhere in court? I let them in the house. And yet, we got people getting charged because they entered when the doors were opened purposefully. There are some things, yes, that should have been charged, and there's a lot that actually should have been charged, but they're hiding because they don't want to charge them. But I need to get back to my subject. Yes. But we need to learn to endure the pain. Endure the situations. Because it is, looking back at it, I would have done it again. I would have easily done it again because here's the thing is, where we are now was worth what we went through back then. Even if it was just the financial areas, even though it was a lot more than the financial. But if it was just for the financial situation itself, this is where people need to understand. Is if it was just the finances, having the hardship for those few years was worth the freedom that came a few years later. But it would have never came without learning those and actually dealing with it. We would still be in financial debt if we continued like normal Americans. we probably wouldn't have even been able to get where we were, because some of the steps that we were taking some high risks. Because there's a time that I was basically took a job to where you pay to work rather than work to, get paid to work, pay to work instead of getting paid to work. Because it was just some of the things. It was just one call a day, and the gas to get the place and do the job cost about the same or more, maybe, than it actually, was paying. But it gave me skill set that, even though I had, it gave me experience so that I could get a better job. But again, all that was after even that we were able to get financially free. See, when we got financially free, we had to go through all that, and it was because of contentment that we were able to do it. We were content without having a cell phone. We were content one year without having heat in our house because it was so expensive to have the heat, because it was so, the furnace was so old that it was extremely expensive just to, keep it warm. So there was a year that we were just keeping it from freezing, about 32 degrees in the house to keep water lines from freezing. Living with heat blankets just to keep warm. But we did it. There's a lot of excuses that we have. And I want you to, I close, I want you to examine all these excuses. I want you to examine, what are the things besides that clothing and raiment that you think you need, that are becoming an idol in your life, that you can't put down, that's holding you hostage and holding your financial freedom hostage. Examine it. Because later on, we're going to go through these and look at some of the things we're going to need to do to become financially free. Never say it will be easy, but it will be worth it. And I can tell you this, that the contentment is not only, especially with godliness, is not only gain in finances, but it's a big gain in your character. When you learn to live without, that for some people might be even a better fast than fasting of food. Fasting from everything else besides the things that are required. That would mean like an energy fast. So this closes, this is the conclusion of this message. And again, remember to be content. Learn contentment. Go back through this vision of Nigeria. Imagine yourself there. You can do it. You can do it. Tell yourself you can do it. Encourage yourself you can do it. Keep your eyes on the goals. The eyes of the goals being character, financial freedom, and that you'll be able to break through the slavery that holds you bound. We'll be here next week, continuing on financial freedom. And we'll also have Sunday service this Sunday. You're welcome to join in. God bless you all.